Moms who know do less so they can focus on what matters most, taking care of themselves, their families, and living their God-given purpose. Moms who know focus on the little things they can do that grow to have a huge impact. You are connecting with your family, your true self, and your God-given purpose. You are a mom who knows. So glad you guys are with us today for this episode of Moms Who Know. Today we are doing our Couples Who Know segment with James and I, and we're going to talk about how to fight in a marriage and fighting specifically in a way that brings you closer instead of tears you apart. So to start off, James, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you think fighting is necessary in a marriage?
Doesn't that sound fun, everybody? How to fight. You need to fight. You know, it's funny because thinking back on hearing about couples fight, you know, when I was not married, I thought, well, I'm just not going to fight. That's just, I don't like to fight by nature. And yeah, I'm just not going to be a fighter. And you know what? As we have navigated this whole marriage thing, it's important to have disagreements. And let me explain what I mean by that. You're your own person. You really need to have your own opinion. It doesn't do anyone any good if you're just going to be the person that goes along with everything. I've tried that a time or two, and it's not beneficial to the marriage. So it becomes important to really find out how to have these disagreements as a couple. And you can call them a fight. And yeah, we have those arguments or fights or disagreements. But it's important to know going into it that you are going to get something out of this. So I guess that's what I'll start with.
Awesome. So I agree. I feel like in a marriage, you have to be willing to put in the effort to work things out. And you have to, sorry, there's random beeping in our house. I don't know where that's coming from. We're going to keep going. I think it's one of our kids' watches.
It is. Tyler broke his watch, and so he's not wearing it. That's the problem.
All right. It's something o'clock. Okay. But you have to be able to work things out, and you have to be able to come to a solution together. And so part of this process is, it's learning about each other. It's engaging. It's hashing it out. It's really wrestling it through the problem and coming to a solution that you can both be okay with.
Absolutely.
Any other thoughts on why it's necessary?
No, just that don't set yourself up for thinking that if you have a fight, you're a bad person. That's all I'd say.
Yes. Okay. I like that. And I think that part of even for us, like the word, we don't like to say fight. And if we're having a discussion, the kids will say, "You're fighting," and we'll say, "No, we're not. We're just talking about stuff." There's a scene in The Incredibles. Do you remember that scene in the first one where they are having an argument, the couple, and then Violet comes out and says, "Why are you guys fighting?" or something, and they said, "We're having a discussion," and she said, "A really loud discussion." And I think that's how our kids feel.
I just want to say something about that really quick. In a book I was just reading about this, that the author pointed out, and it's such a good point, that your kids need to see mom and dad fighting. And it's important how you fight. Yes. So if you're going to be mean and dirty and nasty, what kind of message is that sending to your children? But if you're going to have this discussion, and it might be loud, there might be some tone inflections there, but it teaches them so much. It teaches them how to deal with conflict. And I think that we can all use our wise judgment here and know that a really mean, nasty name, dirty name calling fight is not good to have in front of your kids, of course. And there might be some times where you're going to take things into a different room, not so you can call names, but so that you can work that through without the kids having to see that. But just keep that in your mind. I thought that was a really good point by this author. Hey, it can be healthy for kids to see how adults conflict resolve.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. And what we're going to really get into on this episode is how not to fight, first of all, and then how to fight. So if you're doing it right, if you're fighting in a way that does bring you closer, then that is kind of more the things that the kids can see. If you're doing it wrong, and we'll talk about a few of the ways you can fight wrong and how not to fight, that's a little bit dangerous for the kids, because even if they're not sitting there taking notes, they are learning from that. And those are the patterns that repeat in their marriages and in their families later on. And so we are teaching them by modeling to them, okay, I disagree with this person who I love, and here's how I'm going to work it out.
Yeah, I'll start with this right out the gate. How not to fight. The blame game. You always. As soon as you hear the word you, oh my goodness, doesn't that just raise the hairs on the back of your neck? Just, I always? Really? You think I always do that? And that's just one example, or you never, you always, you. It's just the big fat finger pointing at you, the other person. And I think that that's where you get off to a bad start. Not a good way to start a discussion or a fight or an argument, whatever you want to call it. I would really suggest trying to get away from the word you and look at different ways that you can communicate without blaming.
Yeah, well, it immediately puts you on the defensive,
Sure.
right? As soon as you hear, you always are doing this, like, what? You have to defend yourself. That's the natural thing to do. Now, you don't have to. We're going to talk about that later. But when you hear that, that's the natural inclination.
Absolutely.
For sure. So, okay, I have this awesome quote I want to read to you guys. It's a little long. This is by Jeffrey R. Holland, and he says this. He's talking about a scripture, and then he goes into this. He says, that happens in marriages too, and in other relationships we have. I can't tell you the number of couples I have counseled who, when they are deeply hurt or even just deeply stressed, reach farther and farther into the past to find yet a bigger brick to throw through the window pane of their marriage. And that's P-A-I-N, pain. When something is over and done with, when it has been fully repented of, as fully as it can be repented of, when life has moved on as it should, and a lot of other wonderfully good things have happened since then, it is not right to go back and open up some ancient wound. Let people repent. Let people grow. Believe that people can change and improve. If something is buried in the past, leave it buried. Don't keep going back with your little sand pail and beach shovel to dig it up, wave it around, and then throw it at someone saying, hey, do you remember this? Splat. Well, guess what? That is probably going to result in some ugly morsel being dug out of your landfill with the reply, yeah, I remember it. Do you remember this? Splat. And soon enough, everyone comes out of that exchange dirty and muddy and unhappy and hurt. End quote. Okay, I love that so much. I think it's so telling of what we do. And I love that visual of the mud just splat. And that's a talk I heard many years ago, but as we were preparing this, that came to mind, because I think that's something when you're not fighting right, that's what you do. You pull these things up. They're things that maybe you haven't fully let go of or fully forgiven in the past. And when you're mad in the moment, you pull them up and you attack the other person with them.
Yeah, I like that metaphor. I was just thinking, that the landfill, we all have our landfills just full of garbage. And don't we all know each other's landfills very well? And maybe too well in some instances. And on to the next one on how not to fight, using scorn. And really, I think of this as cheap shots. Using something that will really hurt your spouse from the landfill that you know about, that was buried, and you dug it up again. That's so damaging. That's so harmful. When I think of the word scorn too, I just think of finding a way to make a mockery of somebody. And if you can just slow down and think about the holiness of this marriage, like, it's sacred, right? Your marriage is sacred. And why would you ever want to scorn or make a mock of your spouse? Now, you could probably answer me and say, oh, I'll tell you when, James, when this, fill in the blank. And I think that if you're careful with the blows, that you'll find that it will soften your spouse's heart to not dig in the landfill, if you will.
Yeah, I think along with that is sarcasm. So when I think of scorn, I think of sarcasm. Like I think of mimicking. I don't know if you guys have ever read Lemony Snicket. We listened to the audiobook, and then there was a show about it, but, Vice Principal Nero.
Oh, yeah.
Vice Principal Nero. He just mocks everything that everyone says, and he makes fun of everything. And I don't think we do it exactly like that when we're fighting wrong, but like you said, oh, your mom does this, or whatever. Like you repeat it in this voice.
You're really good at that.
Not that I've practiced or anything. But we want to watch our tone, that it's not scornful, that it's not sarcastic. I think that's a huge thing. Okay, so the next one is not withdrawing. I think men and women can both do this, but I think men have a tendency to do it more.
I agree. Yeah.
And I actually read something really interesting about this. It said that when there's a disagreement, they've done studies. So when couples are disagreeing, the men's blood pressure and blood pressure and heart rate, I think, rise way faster than a woman's. So a woman can stay calm, generally speaking, a little bit longer than a man. So what happens sometimes is maybe the man starts to really get heated, and then he thinks the best thing to do would be to go off and leave the situation. But for a woman, and I can say this from, in our early days, James mentioned he didn't want to fight. And so he thought, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong here, but he thought sometimes that it would be better to just go off and like put the conversation on hold for a long time, or, we're not going to talk about that because it makes me mad, and he didn't want to fight. But meanwhile, that's the thing that really was a struggle for me because I needed to work through this.
Right. Yeah, that's true. It's so tempting for, I don't know, I guess it could be for males and females to want to just withdraw and leave and think, whatever, this is ridiculous, and just leave. But what is that solving? Absolutely nothing.
Right. That's exactly it. So if maybe you do need time in the moment, but if that is what you need, then sometimes we need a cool off period and say, you know what, I really want to talk about this, but I need a little time. Can we talk about it in an hour? Or can we talk about this tomorrow? Or whatever the situation might be, but not to withdraw and turn off and just shut down because your spouse is bringing up an issue. That's so damaging to marriages. So damaging.
You bet. The next one I wanted to talk about was having to be right. Oh, just this attitude of, I'm in it to win it. Like, I'm going to win this argument. I'll make a big confession here to our listeners. I feel like Chanelle is a better arguer than I am. Is that the right word? You're a better...
debater.
She's debater.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's the word. Yeah, see? She has better words than I do. And I don't like to lose to these debates because I feel like she can articulate really well. And usually she's right. She has these great points, and like I have no leg to stand on. I'm outing myself there, but that's not always true. But I think that if you can let go of this attitude of I'm gonna show them, like I can play with fire to fire. I'll match your anger or not anger, or your smarts, or what you have on me. And that's just a wrong attitude. Concerned about winning. You're in this to win it together. If you can keep that attitude and know that you can come to a resolution together, I think that you will. I know you will. But if you're in it to just win it, then what does that do? That just makes one winner. That's no fun.
Right. Well, you win the argument, but the relationship loses.
Yes.
And I feel like that took me a long time to learn because I've mellowed over the years. I used to get into it with like the clerk at the grocery store. If they wouldn't take my coupon, I had oh no, if I'm right, I am right, and that was in our marriage too. Not that we ever have actually had any huge whatever, and a lot of that has to do with James, but I did this is something I have had to check myself on, because it's easy for me to want to out-talk you and to like, well, even if you disagree, well, if I just come up with this better point and this better point and this better point to where you can't say anything, then yeah, maybe I won the battle, but I lost the war, right? I win this little argument, but it causes more friction. And so that's not worth it. So, okay, those are all the ways how not to fight, because really what we're saying here is those methods tear you apart. And what we want when when we have conflict, when we have things that are challenging for us, we want to end up closer. And so we want at the end result to be, we came through this thing and now we're closer because of it. So how to fight? We have 4 ideas here. So the first one is that anytime that you are in conflict, you want to get to a solution and have a purpose for your conflict. So what that means to me is there are too many times in our marriage, and I'd venture to say in a lot of other people's marriage, where we're just grumpy. One of us or both of us have had a hard day, or we're grumpy, or we didn't get what we want, or we're tired or hungry, something totally irrelevant. There's no reason to be fighting, but we take it out on the person closest to us. The purpose of a fight, the purpose of a conflict, the purpose of this is actually that there's an issue and we want to get to a solution. So when we can recognize, I'm just taking out my bad mood on my spouse, then we need to take a step back and let it go. And that's not worth the fight. That is not a thing that we want to bring to conflict with each other.
Yeah, that takes practice.
Totally.
I think that's such a good point that you bring up. And that takes a lot of self-control, really. And I was going to add one here, and just thinking about what you were saying. I think that you need to learn how to fight with control.
Yeah.
If you can stay in control, and I'm not just talking about temper, I'm talking about the overall outcome. And one way you can do this is to seek to understand. Man, if we could just seek to understand our spouse like we want to be understood, wow. I think that I'm just thinking back in our marriage, how I thought Chanelle was dead wrong on some stuff, and she's got all these arguments for it, and I wanted her so bad, like, to understand why she was wrong. But that wasn't getting anywhere. So once I started turning that around and tried to understand where the place where she was coming from, that's what I mean by control. If you can control yourself enough to slow down your thoughts or anger to a place where you want to understand as bad as you want to be understood, then you'll start to make some headway. Because I'm thinking back to our arguments, anytime where I've thought I was right, I was never thinking about why Chanelle thought she was right. And so once I started implementing that and controlling, okay, why does she think she's right? Or why is she right is the better question. Why is she right? And it slows you down. And that's how you make a win-win. One of the ways, I should say.
Yeah, I love that. Hard to do. It's definitely a practice, but if you can always put yourself in that position, okay, what can I learn here? What am I not seeing? And asking yourself questions and really seeking for that, even if you're not perfect at it, even the very act of trying to do that is going to make a huge difference.
One thing I was going to say, so when you're in this discussion or this argument, if you could just pause, like a literal pause, and if your spouse is looking at you like, what, are you going to say anything? Just say, hey, I'm just processing. Just let me process this. And I can remember back in some arguments where Chanelle's done this. She's been a good example where she'll just be quiet for a long time. It seems like a long time. It's maybe not that long. But then she's collecting her thoughts and she's gathering. And if I'm just patient, then she's able to express. And that's what you're looking for.
Yeah. And really what I'm doing in those moments is I'm asking myself, what's the real issue here with me? Like, why is this even bothering me? Sometimes it seems obvious, but other times, like, why should this matter so much? And why is there anger around it? Usually the issue is not the issue. That's maybe a topic for a whole nother day. But a lot of times what's happening when you're in conflict is something that happens is bringing up something else for you. And so it's not that, this little thing that's happening in the moment. It's all the things that have happened before then.
Right.
Okay, so the next one is to change yourself. We need to be a lot more concerned about what we can do and how we react than we are about what our spouse is doing and about their reaction. So I'm going to share, I hope this is okay to share, but that kind of goes along with our recent fight and some of the things that went well and some that didn't. So our most recent fight was on Friday night. We're recording this on a Thursday, so less than a week ago. And it was very circumstantial. I had just had a tough conversation with one of our kids. I was really upset. And all that happened was James wanted to get a pizza for the kids. And it was date night. We were going to go out on a date. He wanted to get a pizza, and I didn't want to get a pizza because lots of reasons, all kinds of things that I won't go into. But it made me irrationally upset, and to the point where I was just like so frustrated with him. So some things that went right when I said something to James, and I can't remember what it was, but it was one of the things in how not to fight. It was, you always this, or, just not talking nice. He paused and he said, do you want to rephrase that? He gave me a chance for a do-over. Not in a snarky way, like, do you want to rephrase that or something? But just, do you want to try again? Like, is that what you really mean? And I was not ready. So here's more how not to fight. I wasn't ready to rephrase it when he said that. And so I went off into our room. And what I did when I was in our room is I asked myself, like, do I want to be in a fight with James right now? Do I want to go on this date tonight? Do I want to let what happened with our kid turn into, ruining the night? And it kind of did. It didn't resolve right away. But then after a few minutes, I came out and we kind of worked through things again. And this was not one with an easy resolution, but it kept coming back to this point right here, which is change yourself. James couldn't fix this for me. I had to resolve things and get it together. And he gave me the space to do that, which I appreciate. But it couldn't come from him. It had to come from the way I was interacting and the way I was treating him.
Ooh, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. I'm just thinking about that night. Yes.
It was a rough night.
It was a rough night, but that's okay. We came out on top. I think we really did. And that's something that you pointed out that's so important to realize is being aware of our spouse's circumstances. Like, I was in the tail end of that conversation that she was having with one of our kids that was so hard. And I knew it was a tough situation she was coming from. So I guess having some sympathy, some mercy from where the other side is coming from or where they've been is important. So anyway, yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So we always tell our kids to be quick to forgive and to apologize. And really, this is a point that we'd like to make on how to fight. It is so important that you humble yourself and be open-minded to the fact that maybe you could be wrong. Maybe you're not. But it's important to try to humble yourself and to be quick to forgive. Because the sooner that hot mess, that that mud goes back into the landfill that you're about to throw, the sooner you're on your way to a happier marriage. And it's hard to do. This goes back to the control thing. You've got to really want to be happy together and want to forgive. So there are some things that you can't probably say, oh, I forgive that right away. But just know that the end result is you want to try to forgive. I want to forgive you. Help me understand why this happened and talk it through. I think even saying that at the very beginning, I want to forgive you, it sends this message of I want to work this out. And so it makes the other person feel like, oh, a sigh of relief. Like, okay, they want to forgive me. I need to help them understand what happened here. Anyway, some thoughts.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's powerful. One other thing that happened on Friday night that went really well is that when I was just having this total meltdown, right, James was looking inward and saying, how can I do better? Even though, everything I was saying wasn't nice and I was really having a hard time, and he was trying to see how he had added to this burden I was feeling as the night wore on. So that's part 2. But I want to finish with this. I remember a long time ago when our kids were little, we got into it about something and I stormed off to our room, and one of the kids followed me in there and they said something like, how can you be mad at your love? Because I called James Love. How can you be mad at your love? And that just softened my heart in that moment, because I was mad and I wanted to be mad. Sometimes we want to hold on to that anger. But when I heard him say this, I was like, yeah, he is my love. I don't want to be mad at him. So when we have that desire, when we realize who this person is our love, this person is the person we want to be with, what is the end result that we want? It's not to win the fight. That's not the end result. The end result is to be closer. When we keep that in mind, we'll stay closer as a couple. So thank you for being here. We hope this has helped. We hope that the next time that conflict comes up in your marriage, you'll use some of these techniques and you'll remember who that person is that you're fighting with, and see that person that you love so much, and keep that in mind even in the hard times. So thank you for being here. Let us know what one little thing has stood out to you today, a thing that you're going to think differently or something you're going to do differently because of this conversation. We love it when you share on social media, Facebook or Instagram, or share that with your spouse. Let them know, today I heard this podcast and this is what I'm going to do differently from now on. That would be a powerful thing for your marriage. Have a great day. We'll see you next week. Bye.